border station floated in the dark sky like a giant shield. Its metal walls were sharp, its gates full of light, and every traveler who came there felt fear. This was the line between safety and danger, between the galaxy of humans and the empire of aliens. At this gate, nothing passed without approval, and today a single human woman stood before the guards. Her name was Ilara. She was tired, her clothes were dusty, and her eyes carried both fear and hope. She had walked for days, traveled in broken ships, and crossed dangerous zones to reach this point. Her voice was soft but firm when she spoke. "I ask for entry, please. I seek safety." Behind the counter stood Commander Vaynar. He was tall with pale skin that glowed faintly under the lights. His eyes were cold like steel. He had served as a border officer for many years, and he had learned one rule above all: never trust humans. To him, humans were troublemakers, spies, and always dangerous. When Ilara handed him her documents, he studied them slowly, his face hard and silent. "This is not enough," Vaynar said, his voice deep. "Your record is incomplete, your background unclear, your presence here is suspicious." Ilara's heart sank. She pressed her hands together. "Please, I have nothing else. My world was destroyed. I have nowhere to go." The waiting hall grew tense. Other travelers, aliens of many kinds, turned their heads to watch. Some whispered in their own languages, some shook their heads. A human at the border was rare, and most believed she would be denied. Vaynar's cold eyes never softened. "You cannot enter," he declared. "You are a risk to the station, to the people inside. Go back." His words were like knives, cutting the last hope in Ilara's heart. Her knees weakened, her voice cracked. "There is no back. I have no home, please. I beg you." But Vaynar did not listen. His training told him mercy was weakness, and weakness destroyed nations. He had seen it before. Refugees turning into thieves, spies turning into killers. He would not make that mistake again. He pressed a button. The gate lights turned red and the path was closed. Ilara stood frozen, her breath shaking. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not scream. Instead, she lowered her head and whispered to herself, "Then I will survive outside." Her voice was so quiet that even Vaynar almost missed it. With slow steps, she turned and walked away from the station. Her figure grew smaller in the distance, swallowed by the endless dark plains beyond the border. For a moment, silence filled the control room. But then, in the distance, a sound echoed, a low hum, sharp and rising. The sound of engines. The alarms in the station began to ring. Red lights flashed across the halls. Officers shouted orders. "Enemy ships detected. Sector 7. Prepare defense." Vaynar's eyes widened, his mind racing. The outpost was under attack, and the first fire had already started. Outside, Ilara stopped and looked up at the sky. She saw streaks of light falling like fire rain. Explosions in the distance shook the ground under her feet. She gasped, fear rising in her chest. The place she had begged to enter was now a target. Inside the control room, Vaynar stared at the monitors. Cameras showed chaos outside, flashes of battle fire, broken ships crashing down. And then, on one screen, he saw her. Ilara was running, trying to find cover as explosions lit up the night. Her small figure moved between shadows, fighting to stay alive. For the first time, something inside Vaynar shifted. The memory of her voice, soft and broken, came back to him. "There is no back. I have no home," she had said. He tightened, his jaw pushing the thought away. "She is not my responsibility," he told himself. But his eyes did not leave the screen. Every time Ilara stumbled, every time she nearly fell, his chest felt heavier. His duty told him she was an outsider. But his heart whispered that maybe he had made a mistake, and mistakes at the border could cost more than one life. The battle outside grew louder. Soldiers shouted, ships fired, smoke rose into the black sky. Ilara found herself trapped near a broken wall, nowhere to hide. She pressed against the stone, breathing hard. A shadow passed over her as a hostile drone circled above. Vaynar clenched his fists. He could order the gates open for only a second. He could save her, but rules screamed in his head. Do not risk the station for one human. Still, his eyes stayed locked on the monitor, his heart beating fast. He whispered to himself, "Why do I care?" Outside, Ilara closed her eyes, waiting for death. Her body shook, but her spirit did not break. And inside the control room, Commander Vaynar felt the first sting of regret. He had denied her life, and now, as the attack grew closer, he began to wonder if it was already too late. The sky above the border station burned with light. Enemy ships broke through the clouds like falling knives. Each one fired beams of red energy that tore the air apart. The station shook as the first strike landed, walls groaning under the blast. Sirens screamed across every hall, calling soldiers to their posts. Inside, Commander Vaynar stood tall in the control room. Orders flowed from his lips like steel, his voice calm but sharp. Shields to full power, redirect fire to Sector 7, protect the civilian wings. The crew obeyed quickly, their hands racing over glowing panels. But deep inside, Vaynar's thoughts were not calm at all. On one monitor he saw Ilara, the human woman he had denied only minutes ago. She was outside, stumbling across the blasted plains. The fire of battle painted her face in red and shadow. Her fragile body seemed so small against the chaos of war. Vaynar turned his eyes away. "She is not my concern," he whispered to himself, but his chest tightened with every passing second. Her voice still echoed in his memory. "There is no back. I have no home." Outside, Ilara ran through the ruins near the border wall. Debris rained around her, sharp metal falling from broken ships above. The air smelled of smoke and burning fuel. Her lungs burned with every breath, yet she pushed forward, refusing to stop, refusing to give up. She searched for shelter, but every corner was filled with fire. Suddenly a beam struck the ground near her feet. The blast threw her down. The dust filled her mouth. Her body ached as she struggled to rise again. When she looked up, she saw a child, an alien child, hiding under a broken crate. The child was crying, shaking, trapped between fire and stone. Without thinking, Ilara ran toward the child. She pulled the crate aside with all her strength. "Come, quickly," she cried, her voice breaking but firm. The child clung to her hand, and together they crawled away from the flames. Her heart beat wildly, not for herself, but for the small life she now carried. In the control room, Vaynar saw it all. His eyes widened as he watched the human risk herself for another. His people had always called humans selfish, weak, dangerous. But here was one, saving a child she had never met. A spark of doubt grew inside him, painful and sharp. "Commander, what are your orders?" an officer asked. Vaynar's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked between the battle and the screen. "Hold positions, do not open the gates," he answered coldly. But his hands shook as he gripped the table, the image of Ilara dragging the child. To safety burned in his mind. The attack grew worse. Enemy drones swarmed the skies, firing bolts of fire into the station's shields. The walls trembled, lights flickered, officers shouted in panic. Yet through the chaos, Vaynar's focus returned. To that single human. She carried the child across the battlefield, stumbling but never stopping. A blast threw them both to the ground, the child cried. Ilara shielded him with her own body. She coughed, blood touched her lips, but she refused to let go. On the screen, Vaynar's heart twisted. His rules told him she was a threat, but his soul whispered she was worth saving. The officer beside him frowned. "Commander, the human is still alive outside. She will die soon. What are your orders?" Silence filled the control room for a moment, heavy and tense. Vaynar closed his eyes, his mind split in war. Duty said no, but something deeper said yes. Outside, Ilara tried to stand again. Her legs shook, the child clung to her clothes. Above them, a drone circled, preparing to strike. She held the boy close and whispered, "Don't be afraid." Her voice was calm, but inside she felt only fear. Vaynar slammed his hand against the table. "Open the gate!" he shouted at last. The officers gasped. Some protested. "Commander, that breaks protocol. She is human." But Vaynar silenced them with a glare, sharper than any blade. "Open it now." The gate lights shifted from red to green. For a brief moment, a path opened through the heavy wall. Ilara's eyes widened as she saw the glow of safety ahead. She pulled the child to his feet, her body burning with pain. Step by step she ran toward the light. Blasts fell behind her one after another. The ground shook, the air split, but she did not stop. Vaynar watched every second, his chest heavy with guilt and fear. Faster, faster, he whispered under his breath. The gate began to close again, the seconds running out. With one final effort, Ilara pushed the child forward. Hands reached out from the other side, pulling the boy in, but Ilara stumbled, her strength fading. The gate was closing, the last chance slipping away. Vaynar's heart pounded like thunder inside his chest. He rushed from the control room faster than anyone expected. His legs carried him down the hall, through the guard posts. The sound of war roared behind him, but he ignored it. In that moment, he was no longer just a border officer. He was a man running to save the life he had once denied. And outside, Ilara fell to her knees as the gate grew narrow, her breath weak, her arms trembling. The drone above locked its target, preparing the final strike. But in her eyes there was no surrender. There was only the will to live, and the faint hope that someone, anyone, would choose to save her. The gate was almost closed. The heavy, steel doors slid together with a grinding sound. Inside, officers shouted, alarms wailed, and the ground shook from another blast. Outside, Ilara knelt in the dirt, her arms around the alien child. She pushed him forward, saving him. But her own body was left behind. The drone above locked onto her, its red eye glowing. The machine hummed as it prepared to fire. Ilara closed her eyes, her breath shallow, her body weak. She thought of her home, the people she had lost, and the cruel voice that had denied her moments ago. Her last thought was simple. At least the child is safe. But then, the sound of boots echoed behind her. Commander Vaynar burst through the half-open gate. His pale skin caught the firelight, his eyes sharp with urgency. For the first time in his career, he ignored every rule, every order, every piece of training. In that moment, he was not a border officer. He was a man making a choice. With one swift motion, he raised his weapon and fired. The beam struck the drone before it could kill Ilara. The machine exploded in the sky, raining sparks over the battlefield. Vaynar ran forward, his long cloak snapping in the wind. "Get up," he shouted, his voice rough but not cold. Ilara looked at him in shock, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. She could not understand why the officer who had turned her away was now risking his life to save her. Her body refused to move, her strength nearly gone. But Vaynar grabbed her arm and pulled her up. "Move, human," he growled, though his grip was steady and strong. Together they stumbled toward the gate, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Every second mattered. The doors closing inch by inch. Behind them, enemy ships fired again, and a blast tore open the ground. The air filled with dust and flame, choking their lungs. Ilara coughed and staggered, nearly falling. Vaynar wrapped one arm around her, dragging her forward. The child they had saved cried out from inside the gate, reaching out his small hands. "Faster," Vaynar muttered, his teeth clenched tight. His heart pounded louder than the battle itself. They reached the closing door just as the gap grew narrow. With a final surge, Vaynar pushed Ilara through. Then he leapt after her, rolling onto the cold steel floor as the gate sealed shut behind them. The sound of battle outside was cut off, leaving only silence and the hiss of heavy doors. For a moment, none of them moved, their breaths loud in the quiet hall. Ilara lay on the ground, her chest heaving, her face pale, her hands shaking, her eyes full of tears. She looked at Vaynar, the man who had denied her hope, and now, the same man had dragged her back from death. She wanted to speak, but no words came. The child ran to her side, holding her hand tightly. "You saved me," he whispered in his alien tongue. Ilara smiled, weakly, brushing the boy's hair with trembling fingers. Her body was broken, but her spirit burned bright, and Vaynar saw it clear as day. The other officers rushed forward, their weapons raised. "Commander, why did you open the gate? Why risk the station for a human?" Their voices were sharp, their faces full of anger and fear. Vanar stood slowly, his tall frame casting a shadow across them. His voice was low but steady. "She risked her life to save one of our children," he said. "She is not the enemy. She is not a spy. She is a survivor." The words hung in the air like thunder. The officers exchanged glances, confused, doubtful, but none dared to challenge him directly. Alara sat up, coughing, her eyes fixed on Vanar. "Why?" she whispered, her voice broken. "Why save me now after you refused me?" The question cut deep, sharper than any blade. Vanar looked at her, his face unreadable. For a long moment, he did not answer. His mind swirled with conflict. Duty against compassion, rules against truth. Finally, he said, "Because I saw who you are, not what you are." The words were heavy, but they carried a spark of honesty he had never spoken before. Alara blinked, her tears shining, her heart caught between gratitude and pain. The battle outside raged on, shaking the walls. The station commander called for reinforcements. But inside, a different war was beginning. Vanar had crossed a line, one that could cost him his career, his honor, or even his life. And Alara, the human he saved, now carried the weight of his choice. She touched her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. She looked at the child beside her, alive only because of her decision, and she looked at Vanar, who had saved her despite his own rules. Something unspoken passed between them, a fragile bond forged in fire and regret. Neither of them could deny it, though neither spoke it aloud. In the distance, another explosion rocked the station. Dust fell from the ceiling, lights flickered, voices shouted. The war was not over, the danger not yet past, but for Alara and Vanar, the true battle had already begun inside their hearts. The battle between what they had been told to believe and what they now saw with their own eyes. And as the alarms screamed again, Vanar turned to his soldiers, his voice rang out with strength. "Prepare to defend the station no matter what comes." But inside, he carried a new burden. The choice he had made, the human he had saved, and the regret that whispered in his chest, for he knew this was only the beginning. The battle outside shook the walls. Flashes of red light from enemy fire leaked through the station windows. Sirens screamed, officers ran, voices echoed through the steel halls. But in the middle of this chaos, Alara lay on a small medical bed, her face pale, her breathing weak, her body covered in bruises and burns. Commander Vanar stood at her side. His tall frame seemed unshaken, yet his eyes betrayed a storm. He had saved her, broken every protocol, and now the weight of that choice pressed on him. Other officers stared with suspicion, whispering behind his back. Why would their commander risk the station for a human? The medic, a short alien with silver skin, worked quickly. "Her injuries are serious, but she will live," the medic said. "She needs rest, water, and care." Vanar gave a silent nod. His gaze locked on Alara. Her eyes slowly opened, soft and full of pain. When she saw him, her body stiffened. She remembered his cold words, the way he had denied her at the gate. Yet now, this same man had carried her through fire. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why are you here?" Her voice was weak, almost broken. Vanar's answer came slowly, heavy with guilt. "Because I could not watch you die," he said. The words were simple, but for him they felt like chains breaking. Alara turned her head away, tears filling her eyes. "You already let me die once," she said softly. The words struck him harder than any weapon. For the first time, Vanar felt shame so deep it burned inside him. He wanted to defend himself, to explain, but no excuse seemed strong enough. Instead, he stood silent, his jaw tight, his heart heavy. The sound of her quiet sobs filled the space between them. Nearby, the alien child she had saved sat close. He refused to leave Alara's side, holding her hand tightly. The boy's large eyes looked up at Vanar with confusion. "She saved me," the child whispered in his own tongue. "She is good." Vanar closed his eyes for a moment. The child's words pierced through his armor of pride and duty. He had always believed humans were selfish and cruel, but this one had risked everything for a child not her own. The truth he had denied for years now stared him in the face. A group of soldiers entered the medical bay. Their leader stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Commander, the council demands answers. You disobeyed orders. You opened the gate for a human." The soldiers' eyes were cold, filled with judgment. They looked at Ilara as if she were poison. Vaynar's voice cut through the tension, firm and steady. "She is alive because she has courage greater than many of us," he said. "She saved one of our children when she could have run. She deserves more than suspicion." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared defy their commander openly. Still, their distrust hung heavy in the air. Ilara's eyes widened at his words. For the first time, she saw not just a strict officer but a man capable of truth. Her lips parted but no sound came, her emotions too heavy to speak. Vaynar turned back to her, his tone quieter now. "You may not believe me, but I regret denying you. I regret it deeply." Silence lingered between them, broken only by the distant thundering of weapons. Ilara's tears slid down her face, but she gave no reply. Her heart was torn, anger and gratitude fighting inside her. She did not know if she could trust him, but she could not deny his actions. The bond forming between them was fragile, yet undeniable. Hours passed. The battle outside raged on, but within the small bay, a strange calm settled. Vaynar brought water to her, steadying her hand as she drank. He adjusted her blanket, checked her wounds, and stood guard by her side. Every small act felt like a silent apology. Ilara watched him with guarded eyes. Each gesture chipped away at the image of the cold officer she had first met. For a moment she almost believed he cared, but the memory of being cast out still burned like fire. Her voice finally broke the silence. "You saved me, but you also broke me," she whispered. Her words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and bitter. Vaynar lowered his head, unable to deny the truth. "I know," he said quietly, "and I will not make that mistake again." The alien child leaned closer to Ilara, resting against her. His presence was small but full of trust. Vaynar saw it and felt something stir inside him. This human had earned the trust of a child in moments, something his people had failed to do in years. The station shook again, louder this time. The medic shouted, "Shields are weakening. We may not hold much longer." Vaynar's communicator buzzed, voices demanding his return to the command deck. But he hesitated, his eyes still fixed on Ilara. The choice between duty and compassion weighed heavily once more. Finally he turned and spoke to her softly. "Rest, human. You will be safe here." Ilara looked at him, searching his face for lies. But all she saw was a man carrying regret and something more. Respect. And in that unspoken moment, a bond, stronger than any law, was born. The alarm screamed again, calling Vaynar back to battle. He rose, his tall figure casting a long shadow over her bed. His voice hardened once more, but his eyes stayed soft. "I will protect this station, and I will protect you," he vowed. And with that, he left the room, leaving Ilara with her racing heart. For the first time since her world was lost, she felt the faint spark of safety, not from the walls of the station nor from the soldiers outside, but from the strange bond she now shared with the very alien who once denied her. A bond born of fire, regret, and something neither of them yet understood. The station walls shook with thunder. Outside, the enemy attack raged without mercy, their ships circling like vultures. Inside, the command deck flickered with red light. Voices shouted over alarms. Every officer fought to hold the defense together. But in the middle of this storm, whispers began to spread. The whispers were about her, the human Ilara, the one who should never have been inside the station. Soldiers glanced at her with suspicion, their eyes sharp with distrust. They remembered the explosions, the sudden breach in security, and their minds searched for someone to blame. Ilara sat quietly in the medical bay, her wounds still fresh, her body weak, but her heart unbroken. The alien child she saved refused to leave her side. his small hand clutching hers. Yet she could feel the weight of the stairs, the coldness of the guards at the door. Their silence was not safety. It was. Judgment Commander Vaynar entered the room. His tall figure filled the doorway, his armor scarred with ash from battle. He looked at Alara, then at the soldiers whispering nearby. "Report," he ordered, his voice low but firm. The guards exchanged uneasy glances before one spoke. "There has been sabotage inside the station," the guard said. "Systems failed in Sector 4, explosives planted near the shield core." Vaynar's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "Did the enemy breach the walls?" he asked. The guard shook his head slowly. "No, Commander, there was no breach," he replied, "which means the saboteur is inside." The words cut through the air like knives. All eyes turned to Alara, sitting on the bed, fragile and silent. Whispers grew louder, doubt spreading like poison. Vaynar's chest tightened. He knew what they were thinking. He saw it in their eyes. They believed the human was the traitor, the one who brought danger into their home. The irony struck him hard. He had once thought the same of her. But now he was no longer sure Alara felt the weight of their suspicion. Her hands shook, but her voice stayed steady. "I had nothing to do with this," she said. Her words were simple, but no one in the room looked convinced, except the child who squeezed her hand tighter and whispered, "She saved me." One of the officers stepped forward. "Commander, the council demands the human be detained," he said firmly. "She may be working with the enemy. It is too dangerous to let her stay free." Alara's eyes widened in shock, her heart pounding. "Please, I am not your enemy," she pleaded. The room grew tense. Soldiers placed their hands on their weapons, ready to follow orders. Vaynar stood still, his mind torn in two. Duty demanded he obey the council, to hand Alara over. But his heart remembered the battlefield, the child, and the fire in her eyes. He looked at her, and she looked back. Her voice was quiet, yet it pierced through the noise. "If you give me up, you will never know the truth," she said. Her words sank deep into him, heavy as stone. The choice before him was no longer simple. Vaynar turned to his soldiers, his tone cold. "Leave us," he commanded. The officers hesitated, anger flashing in their eyes. But no one dared to disobey their commander. Slowly they stepped back, leaving only Vaynar, Alara, and the child. Silence filled the room once more. Vaynar's gaze locked on Alara, sharp and searching. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice a low growl. "You are human. Your story is unproven, and now sabotage threatens us all." Alara lifted her chin, her eyes shining with tears but unbroken. "Because I chose to save, not destroy," she said. "I had every chance to run, but I stayed for the child. I stayed for life, not death." Her voice cracked, but her words rang true. Vaynar felt them strike something deep inside, something he could not ignore. For once, he found no lie in her eyes. Still, doubt lingered like a shadow. If she was innocent, then who had betrayed them? The question gnawed at his mind, pulling him in two directions. He turned away, pacing the room, his hands clenched tight. He was commander of the border, but tonight, he felt powerless. Alara watched. Him, her heart heavy. She knew her life rested on his choice, not hers. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. "I am not asking you to believe me, only to see me." The words floated in the air. Quiet but sharp as glass, the child pressed closer to her. His small eyes stared up at Vaynar, full of innocence. "She is good," the boy said again. Simple words, yet they carried a truth no weapon could cut through. And Vaynar felt his defenses crack. Another explosion shook the station, louder this time. The lights flickered, the walls groaned, the battle outside was worsening. Vaynar turned sharply to Alara, his decision made. "I will not hand you over, not yet," he said firmly. "But if you betray us, I will end it with my own hands." Alara nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "I understand," she whispered. Though fear lived in her heart, hope flickered too. Hope that someone, even one, would finally see her truth. Vaynar's jaw tightened as he prepared to leave. As he stepped toward the door, he paused, looking back. His eyes lingered on her longer than before. He knew the danger of his choice, the weight it carried. But something inside him told him he was right, and deep down, he feared what the real betrayal would reveal. The station groaned under the weight of battle. Every wall shook as enemy fire hammered the shields. Flashes of red light burst through the windows, turning the halls into shadows of flame. Soldiers shouted orders, weapons clashed, alarms screamed. And through this storm, one question burned in Commander Vaynar's mind. Who was the traitor inside? He had chosen not to hand Alara over, yet the council still demanded her capture, their fear growing by the hour. To them, she was human, and that was enough reason for doubt. But Vaynar's instincts whispered another truth. The betrayal came from within, not from the one he had saved. Alara sat in the quiet of the medical bay, her body weak, her wounds still raw, but her spirit alert. She felt the cold eyes of guards on her back. Every glance was heavy with suspicion, every whisper a blade. Yet she kept her silence, waiting, watching. The alien child she saved never left her side. His trust was her shield, his small presence her comfort. Even when soldiers doubted her, he clung to her hand. "You are not bad," he whispered, again and again. Those words kept her heart from breaking. Vaynar returned, his armor scarred, his face sharp with determination. He looked at Alara, then at the child, then at the guards. "Leave us," he ordered, his tone brooking no argument. The guards hesitated, then obeyed, leaving the room in silence. Only the three remained. Vaynar's voice lowered, heavy with, "Wait." "The sabotage was not human work," he said. "The devices used were made with our own tech, the codes bypassed by someone with clearance." Alara's eyes widened, her breath caught. "You mean one of your own betrayed you?" she whispered. He gave a slow nod, his jaw tight. "Yes, someone inside the station," he said, "and I intend to find out who." Alara leaned forward despite her pain, her voice urgent. "Then let me help." Vaynar's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering once more. "You expect me to trust you after all this?" he asked. Alara met his gaze without fear. "You don't have to trust me, just watch me," she said. Her voice was steady, her eyes unbroken. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Vaynar gave a sharp nod. "Very well, but know this. If you betray me, I will end it myself." Alara did not flinch. She only whispered, "Understood." And with that, the uneasy alliance began. They moved through the corridors together. The station shook under bombardment, dust falling from the ceilings. Soldiers saluted Vaynar but cast wary glances at Alara. She ignored them, her eyes searching, her mind working. Every sound, every shadow, every detail mattered. They reached the power sector where the sabotage began. The smell of burnt wires filled the air. Smoke drifted along the walls. Panels were shattered. Sparks danced across the floor. Vaynar knelt, examining the remains of the explosive. "Alara, what do you see?" he asked. She stepped closer, her hands trembling but her eyes sharp. Her fingers brushed the broken circuits, her brow furrowed. "This isn't human tech," she said softly. "The design is alien, your design, but changed." Vaynar's eyes narrowed. "You recognize the difference?" he asked, surprised. Alara nodded. "My father was an engineer. He taught me how to see what doesn't belong." Her voice shook with memory, but her eyes stayed firm. She pointed at a mark on the metal. "This piece doesn't match. It was placed by someone from inside." Vaynar's chest tightened. Her words confirmed his suspicion. His people were turning, on their own. But who and why? He rose, his hand tightening on his weapon. "The traitor is close," he muttered. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Vaynar and Alara froze. From the shadows, an officer approached, one of Vaynar's own lieutenants. His armor gleamed, his face calm, but his eyes too sharp. "Commander," the lieutenant greeted, his tone too smooth. Alara felt the air change. Her heart raced. Her instincts screamed danger, she whispered. "It's him." Vaynar's eyes flicked to her, then back to his officer, his voice steady but his body tense. "Where were you during the last attack?" Vaynar asked. The lieutenant smiled faintly. "Fighting, as always." But Alara shook her head. "No, look at his boots," she said quickly. "They're covered in burn marks from the power sector." The lieutenant's smile faded. For a moment, silence weighed heavy in the corridor. Then his hand moved to his weapon, fast and sharp. Vaynar drew his blade in a flash, blocking the strike. Sparks flew as steel met steel. Alara stumbled back, shielding the child. Her eyes wide as the two warriors clashed. The corridor echoed with the sound of battle. Vaynar's strength against betrayal. The lieutenant's fury against the commander's will. With a final strike, Vaynar disarmed him. The weapon clattered to the floor. The traitor pinned against the wall. His eyes burned with hate, his voice a hiss. "You are weak, Commander. Saving a human while your people burn." But Vaynar pressed the blade to his throat. "No, it is you who betrayed us." Vaynar growled. "You endangered the station, your own kind." "For what?" The traitor spat on the floor, refusing to answer. But the truth was clear. The enemy was not outside alone, the enemy had already been within. Vaynar bound the lieutenant, his soldiers arriving to drag him away. The whispers of betrayal spread quickly, filling the station with fear. But the council could no longer blame Alara. She had seen what others missed. She had revealed the truth, and for the first time, the suspicion in their eyes began to fade. Vaynar turned to her, his voice softer than before. "You were right," he admitted. Ilara's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, her eyes shining with quiet strength. "I told you," she said, her voice steady. "I am not here to destroy. I am here to survive." And in that moment, Vaynar felt his regret deepen, for he knew he had almost let her die at the gate. And yet, she had saved them all. The truth was now clear. Not all enemies come from outside. Sometimes the enemy wears the face of your own people. The station was quiet after the storm. The traitor had been taken away, bound in chains, his eyes burning with silent rage. Outside, the enemy fleet had retreated, broken for now, their ships, fading into the endless dark. But inside the border station, the scars of battle remained. Walls cracked, shields damaged, lives lost. Commander Vaynar stood in the command hall. His soldiers surrounded him, their faces tired, their armor scarred. They looked at him with questions in their eyes. Why had he saved the human? Why had he defied the council? Vaynar gave no speech, no excuse, only silence. He walked away from them, his long steps heavy, down the corridor, past the wounded, past the whispers, until he reached the small medical bay once again. There, Alara rested on the bed, the child asleep at her side. Her eyes lifted as Vaynar entered, her face pale but steady. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was thick, filled with memories of fire, fear, and choices. Finally, Alara broke it, her voice soft but sharp. "You denied me at the gate, and I nearly died," she said. Her words struck deep, sharper than any blade. Vaynar's chest tightened. He lowered his head, his voice heavy. "I know," he said, "and I regret it more than anything." He stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "I judged you by your blood, not your heart, and that was my failure." Ilara's eyes glistened with tears. "You could have left me outside, let the fire take me," she whispered. "But you came back." Her voice shook, her emotions torn between anger and gratitude. "Why?" Vaynar's voice was quiet, almost human. In its softness, "Because when I saw you save the child, I saw truth," he said. "You were not my enemy. You were life itself, fighting to survive." His hand tightened into a fist at his side. "And I realized I could not let that die, not again." Ilara's heart twisted. She remembered his cold refusal, the pain of being turned away. But she also remembered his arms pulling her through the fire, the sound of his voice shouting for the gate to open, the sight of him standing between her and death. The bond between them was fragile. It had been forged in betrayal, regret, and survival. Yet it was stronger than rules, stronger than walls. She gave a small nod, her lips trembling. Then maybe, you are not as cold as you pretend. A faint smile touched Vaynar's lips, the first in years. Perhaps not, he admitted, but his smile faded quickly, replaced by the weight of reality. The council will not forgive this easily, he said. They wanted you gone, and I defied them. Ilara's eyes darkened. Then you risked everything for me, she whispered. Her words were not a question, but a truth. Vaynar gave a slow nod. Yes, and I would do it again. The child stirred, opening his large eyes. He looked at Vaynar, then at Ilara. You both saved me, he said softly. His innocence cut through the heaviness of the moment, for in his voice there was no fear, only trust. Vaynar felt the sting of regret again. He had denied this woman, nearly killed her with his choice. Yet now she had become a symbol of something greater, compassion, survival, and the truth that his people had long refused. He looked at her with a newfound resolve. Ilara, he said firmly, from this day, you are under my protection. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught. You mean you will let me stay? She asked. He nodded, his voice steady. You will not be cast out again, he said. Not while I draw breath. The words rang like iron, carrying the weight of a vow. Ilara's tears fell silently. Her heart breaking and healing at once, she whispered, Thank you. But even as hope flickered, the shadows of danger lingered. The enemy outside had not been destroyed, only delayed. The traitor inside was not the only one. The station was weak, the war far from over. Both of them knew this was not the end, but the beginning. Vaynar turned toward the window. The stars stretched endless and cold, yet for the first time, he did not see only enemies in the dark. He saw the fragile spark of something new, a bond between two worlds that should have hated each other behind him. Ilara closed her eyes, her body weak but her spirit alive. She thought of her lost home, her people scattered among the stars. And now she thought of this alien officer who had first denied her, who had then chosen to save her, and who now stood as her protector. Her heart whispered a truth she could not yet speak aloud. That sometimes enemies were not enemies at all, that sometimes survival meant finding light in the most unlikely places, and that maybe, just maybe, regret could become redemption. If one dared to make the choice, the alarms were silent now, the halls calm for a moment, but the air was heavy with what was to come. Ilara and Vaynar both knew the fight was far from finished, yet as their eyes met one last time, there was no fear, only the promise of a story that was not yet over, and in the stillness of that border station, an alien commander and a human survivor stood bound not by duty or blood, but by a fragile bond born in fire, loss, and regret, a bond that would change the stars forever, and the war was only just beginning.